So my name is Les Murray from Tellabs, and I'm a senior principal engineer here at Tellabs, responsible for system engineering. And today we just wanted to do a little demonstration of some of the automation features of the OLT that can help automate all of the processes and procedures that you might normally do manually on the OLT. So the OLT has some capabilities for zero-touch automation that allow you to automate many of the processes. So one of them is you can do automated configuration of the PON port profiles, and the PON port profiles will be applied to all the PONs on the OLT when you add it to the EMS. Additionally, you can try to turn on ONT auto config, and what that does is it automatically configures the ONT as soon as it's seen out on the PON. It's auto configured, and there are templates which configure all the ONT attributes, and in addition there are templates that can be used for the uniports that configure all of the uniport settings as well. So as soon as an ONT is recognized, it'll be fully configured and configure all the ports. And in addition, what you can do on top of that is you can couple it with radius authorization on the port to allow, actually configure the actual settings based on authentication. So what happens with radius is you'll authenticate the endpoint, and then you'll actually get policy from the policy server on the other end. And the NAC appliance is what authorizes access. So we can see, and this is kind of a little drawing of what you'll kind of see in the demo. In this use case, we're using Cisco ISE as the NAC appliance, but you could use Cisco ISE, Aruba ClearPass, Forescout Counteract, Windows Policy Server. We're very compatible and can be used with most policy engines. And what you can see over on the left-hand side is that we have a PAE, or port authentication entity, on the OLT, and that is the port authenticator. He's the gatekeeper, which allows or disallows packets to flow, but that's actually controlled by responses from the NAC appliance. The protocol that's used to do this is radius, and in the radius protocol, what happens is the OLT will send credentials or MAC addresses towards the NAC appliance, and then the NAC appliance will look at what's been sent and decide on an authentication response. So he'll either grant access or revoke access for that particular device based on the credentials or MAC that was sent. In addition, the appliance can also send back a policy, and the policy will tell us all the things that need to be done to the port in terms of like VLAN and bandwidth and ACLs possibly that need to be applied to the port. So that allows the policy to actually reside up in a NAC appliance somewhere and not down on the OLT, so that it gives you more of a cloud-centric type approach where you're programmed by the NAC appliance. Some of the other nice features of NAC appliances like this is that it can do profiling. So Cisco ISE can do profiling of a device either by looking at the SNMP MIB and looking at the LLDP MIB there, or it can do it via looking at the MAC address. Additionally, it can make decisions based on the credentials that are offered. So the username and password, possibly username, password, and certificate, or in the case of just a device, you might have a device certificate. And based on any of those criteria that are passed up to the NAC appliance, he can actually make decisions on the policy that's applied. You could, for example, use the user's login, the username password, to actually decide which policy to apply to that user. So once the policy comes down, the OLT will actually grant access to the port, after applying the policy, and then it'll get access to the network. So the next thing what we're going to do is I have my partner Dave Wisnowski here, and he's going to help me with this demo. I'm going to stop sharing, and Dave's going to start sharing. And he has the demo set up over on his system over there. And so you should now be able to see his system. So now let's take a look at what's actually going to happen. So first, let's take a look at the template. And so you can see the template that's being used. And this is just an example of one of many templates which can be applied. And in this case, it applies to all Ethernet ports anywhere on the OLT. And there's a set of profiles. And these profiles also will configure all of the settings on the port and set it up as a PAE authenticated port so that 802.1x and or MAB can be used. So then if you'll close the template window. And so what you can see here is the system that we have set up. And on the right-hand side, you'll notice the user labels save voice and data. We have 4 phones that are attached to this particular ONT, along with a PC. The window down below is actually the PC. So we're also remoting into that PC via wireless interface, but we're going to authenticate on the wired port. And so what we're going to do in this demo is we're going to delete the ONT. So Dave, if you'll go ahead and delete that ONT. And so that will completely remove that ONT from the system, and the system doesn't remember anything about it. It doesn't remember what was attached to those ports or anything else. And so now it's going to start searching, and every so often it'll go out searching for new ONTs on the port. And we'll see the ONT show up on the left-hand side as soon as it's recognized by the system. There we go. Now the ONT has shown up and been recognized, and the templates have all been applied. You can see them all applied to the ONT ports. And then what's going to happen next is you'll see the ports going active, and now they're in service. So those phones have come online, and the PC should soon. Windows takes a little while sometimes, but it should actually be bringing in that port. And as we refresh, we'll start to see the phones show up, and we'll also see the PC start to get profiled. So you can see one of the phones has started to show up, the voice line's there. So that phone, what has actually happened is a policy has been applied, and in the policy we also included an indicator which is now showing that that's a voice line configured. We can see the PC has now started posturing, so Cisco ISE has started posturing that PC, and you can see it's being scanned below at the bottom. And as soon as the scan is complete, what will happen, it'll go from posture unknown to actually having the data port applied. The phones that we have attached are pretty old Cisco phones, about the oldest we could find. So there we go, and they're now coming in. And so now all of the ports are configured, and we do have them completely running. So the PC is running and able to connect to the internet, and all the phones are now ready to make phone calls. And Dave, I think you wanted to show on ISE that it was actually transitioning through the states.
Yeah, so the very first state obviously is the initial authentication where it shows Tellabs wired unknown or posture unknown. The second state is where ISE profiles the device as a compliant device and sends a change of authorization to the OLT to initiate a new authentication sequence where the compliant authorization credentials will be applied to the port. In other words, the data service. So, and that's what we're seeing here with this guy.
Yep, I appreciate that, Dave. So now what you can see is that you can basically set up the OLTs so that in general, most of the PON ports and ONTs just come online, you know, touchless with no real provisioning actions taken, and that you can actually defer a lot of the policy decisions out to a policy server like ISE, who can automatically recognize the attached devices and program them for the correct service. So thanks a lot, Dave.
You bet. You bet.